I'm very pleased to welcome back Susharita Mulparu of Forrester. And we're going to spend the next 10 to 15 minutes just talking about Amazon, the strategic implications of Amazon on your retail business. We'll try to keep this mostly at a macro level, but I'm certainly willing to jump into more tactics and practical advice as questions come up at the end of our session. So I want to start, first of all, just by acknowledging this New York Times article that came out today, and you were quoted in the article discussing the trade-offs that states and the e-commerce industry see when they are dealing with tax nexus on a state-by-state basis and the implications that has on ultimately Amazon's distribution center footprint. Right. So I guess just to seed the conversation a little bit, you know, once Amazon is paying tax in all 50 states, the financial disincentives for them to build anywhere and everywhere and get that same-day shipping capability into every metropolitan market disappears. Right. So do you want to talk a little bit about how that has the potential to impact the e-commerce industry?
Well, I mean, I think that everybody knows that, well, if you don't know, I'll tell you, that Amazon was very, very paranoid about any perception of having Nexus outside of the places where it had Nexus, which is why they wouldn't even send people to conferences to speak, right? So that was pre-kind of sales tax issue philosophy. Now, when you have essentially abandoned that position, it's gloves off at that point. So it's everything from distribution centers to stores to, you know, the potential to use Walgreens as a, not that they are, but, you know, kind of any physical distribution center as a pickup point. It unencumbers them from staying in Seattle for lockers. I mean, it's a very, it then, you know, kind of, that then raises the question of the store strategy, the same day shipping issue, the ability to, you know, kind of eliminate some of their distribution costs because the consumer now absorbs the last mile, and they could be quicker to get there than a lot of these retailers who've been talking about it but still haven't executed it. So I think that that's really the, you know, kind of the be careful what you ask for, you know, kind of trade-off. It was almost better to keep them out of your turf, you know, when you know, they kind of had the sales tax issue to rely on. And all of our data said that the whole sales tax advantage was overstated anyway. I know that there are a lot of people that don't believe that, but, you know, and it's an issue in consumer electronics, but outside of CE and hardware, it's not an issue, you know? So
yeah, I'm not sure if it was the Toys R Us keynote yesterday, but someone was saying that Amazon's primary economic advantage is simply their ability to avoid paying tax, and you don't believe that?
Their fundamental, I mean, you know this as well as anyone, Eric, having been there. Their economic advantage is that they cross-subsidize product lines, and that's not something that retailers do. Retailers have a history of, you know, every business unit has to be profitable in and of itself. Otherwise, why have that business unit? You don't have an oil company and then use the profits from the oil company to subsidize your money-losing, you know, store. And that's essentially, you know, what they're doing with, you know, marketplace and advertising and all of these other businesses that drive the profit of the company. I mean, Amazon Marketplace alone, from our estimates, is I think like 20% of the revenue of the company, but like 150% of its profit. You know, and that's just one profitable unit. You know, you take the advertising business, and that's another like 40 to 50% of profit. You see, you keep adding this, and it's like, well, the rest of the business, that, you know, I mean, that obviously means the rest of the business, the core business, the shipping from DCs, is losing a tremendous amount of money.
At some point, those economics change, though, as the distribution centers are stood up and the inventory is there. Do you believe that there's kind of a tipping point in terms of Amazon's like ability to really convert all of that physical infrastructure into higher margins? Is there some point at which they have sufficient market control where it's no longer all about price leadership and lowest cost to the doorstep?
Well, I mean, I'm curious to hear what you think too. I mean, it's almost as if there's a part of Amazon that's trying to become a a carrier. They're trying to become like a UPS or FedEx. I mean, if they're getting into last mile and they're getting into, building, 50 more DCs that are 1 million square feet each, I mean, that really puts them, at a very, very different level of competition. So, maybe there's a part of Amazon that, they've disrupted media, they've disrupted retail, they've disrupted devices. Maybe they've, it's essentially a duopoly or slash oligopoly in shipping anyway. So it's another thing to shake up. So that's a question. I mean, does it just become an enormous expense because it is an enormous expense, or do products like fulfillment by Amazon become so large, or can fulfillment by Amazon become so large? And maybe it can if you basically decide to go outside of retail and just become a carrier, or a distribution center and a logistics provider for all kinds of companies.
I want to switch gears here in a minute and talk about sort of Amazon as competitor versus partner for a retail merchant that's in the audience. But to segue there, just to talk about two programs that we're aware of at Mercent. Of course, Amazon provides the Amazon Product Ads program, which is basically directing traffic back to your own storefront, your own shopping cart for conversion. So there's really no ownership controversy, if you will, customer ownership controversy there. But the other program that's really been decoupled by Amazon from the Marketplace initiative is Fulfillment by Amazon. And so just maybe a point on some of the themes that you touched on. We see the use cases for FBA expanding. Not only are retailers looking at FBA to create incremental capacity during the holiday season for a select portion of their overall product assortment, but we're also seeing, to your point about the lower cost of Amazon as a shipper, through FedEx and UPS, by virtue of the fact that Amazon has negotiated these favorable rate cards with the largest carriers, our retail merchants are actually expanding their assortment into heavier, bulkier items that they otherwise would not be able to fulfill economically. And by leaving those products in FBA and leveraging Amazon's negotiated rate cards with the carriers, they can actually expand their product assortment into new categories, into new suppliers and brands. So switching gears for a bit and talking a little bit about where you see Amazon headed, I thought your comment about retail presence was interesting. I don't know if you've seen any evidence that beyond the lockers they're building physical presence.
No.
Are we going to see Amazon stores anytime soon?
I mean, it could be pickup depots. I mean, they're probably, I would think if they're going to have stores for anything, it's going to be for the Kindle. It's, a showroom to help people touch that device and have support that is a person walking them through the experience, like Barnes & Noble has for the Nook, and Apple has, especially as fewer and fewer retailers are even willing to carry the Kindle in their stores. So I think that's potential. I mean, it could be at airports, it could be very strategic destinations.
In Chicago, we met at the Shed Aquarium a few months ago, and you made a comment that I thought was pretty powerful, which is, as a retail merchant, you have to have an Amazon strategy. Do you want to just talk a little bit more about what you meant there? It was a cold evening, and our comments were cut short, but can you just expand a little bit on what are the options for a merchant when we think about an Amazon strategy?
I think it's a whole range of options. I mean, it could be, not working at all with Amazon and kind of being very wary of anything and everything that they do. It could be partnering with companies like eBay or Buy.com or others that have marketplaces. It could be, just having a stronger position in how you think about a marketplace, even if you are on Amazon. They have some pretty stringent terms, but maybe that's a negotiating point if you really have enough leverage to be able to. There's certainly a lot of brands that they're approaching that they're trying to get on their site. That to me is if they're approaching you, you should have leverage to ask for some better terms, like getting the customer list and being able to negotiate different rates. So I mean, I think that those are some of the things that I was referencing. But you know, I think that it's an interesting point with respect to the FBA point, and you know, kind of, you know, I mean, are there opportunities to leverage their economies of scale to improve your own business? And that's an interesting point, and I think that it's relevant for certain kinds of retailers. If you are a very, very small merchant, the delta between what Amazon's rates are and what your rate is probably significantly higher. But you know, for a large retailer, and from everything that I've heard from the carriers, they claim that there is not more than a 30% delta in price between their most, you know, kind of active kind of carrier, or their most active client, and you know, kind of the rate card. So, you know, I think that there's something to be said there. And I mean, we don't know how much Amazon's even subsidizing FBA to try to grow that business and, you know, put boxes on the shelves.
It gets back to this question of how much investment are they making in the near term, in, you know, expecting longer term profits from that,
right,
that investment. So I have two final questions for you. I want to touch on, I know this is about Amazon, but I want to touch on sort of the Amazon versus Google e-commerce presence in the industry, and whether you have any thoughts on the emerging Google Wallet, Trusted Stores program. I mean, I guess from an insider's perspective in the industry, it appears that Google is making some pretty big investments to look more Amazon-like with respect to third-party retail relationships. And then we'll also touch on dynamic pricing or repricing. But do you want to just talk on Google for a minute, your thoughts on the company?
Well, I think that, you know, everyone kind of see Amazon versus Google. It's like the devil you know and the devil you also know. So, you know, how do you, you know, what's the right, you know? I mean, there's that political cartoon about, you know, which party do you vote for, which devil do you go with? You know, I mean, obviously, you know, at least Google they're not going to start selling products anytime soon, and even if they were, it would be a short-lived endeavor. So you know, they're less of a threat in that regard. They've launched so many products that have just not gone anywhere, that my bigger concern with Google is that they launch these half-assed initiatives that they have no support behind, and then it just loses momentum because the retailers don't get behind it, and they don't get behind it, and you know, they move on to whatever is the next big thing. On the other hand, Amazon seems to be a little bit more committed, but I mean, I think that you just have to always watch your back with Amazon, because you never know what they're going to do next, and I don't think that they've hidden their ambitions and wanting to basically dominate every sector of retail. I mean, Google Wallet, I think, is a perfect example of, you know, kind of that, you know, kind of frenzy that they generate that just completely dies. I mean, now they call Google Wallet everything that's financial, you know, the wallet, you know, their whole app store is in the Google Wallet now, checkout is in the Google Wallet, and what was Google Wallet, which was supposed to be NFC, is not even, well, that was such a non-starter for a lot of reasons, but.
Yeah, and that payment space is getting even more crowded, right? We saw the announcement of the Apple Passbook, which is the app on the new iPhone 5 today, right. So clearly everyone's trying to figure out a strategy that works there, right. PayPal, Square notwithstanding. Yeah. So just a final comment then, we saw you guys issue numbers that demonstrated that 20% of all e-commerce transactions start with research on Amazon, another 19% start with research on Google. So combined, assuming that online research is driving not only online but also offline transactions, you have two companies that are influencing 40% of, you know, certainly all of e-commerce and up to half of offline retail. And then at the same time, we see Amazon in particular, the frequency with which prices are changing on that marketplace, increasing the aggressiveness with which retailers are approaching their pricing strategy. What are the implications of this, of I guess both trends, the visibility of Amazon and also the aggressiveness of the pricing on their marketplace program with regard to retailers' profit margins long term? And right. Do you have any thoughts on on strategically how retailers combat that transparency on the mobile devices and elsewhere?
Well, I think that Amazon, to their credit, they have done one thing very, very well, which these numbers speak to, which is they're really, really committed to the customer experience, and that is reflected in these numbers. It's reflected in why the consumer goes to Amazon increasingly, more than, well, like even 3 or 4 years ago, we had data on where did you start your research, and the number one answer, I think in 2009, was Google, and a distant number 2 was Amazon, and that figure has completely reversed, where the number 1 destination is now Amazon, and distant 2 is actually Google. I have to go back into the exact figures, but I mean, that was to me the biggest, and that only happens because they have gained the trust of customers, and they've gained that trust in part because they have this repository of tremendous information. They have often very, very low prices. They have very, very reliable shipping in general. I mean, there are of course exceptions that we could all point to, but for the most part, they do a better job doing what they do than the average retailer. In fact, better than most retailers, and that's what ends up getting reflected here. The end game with respect to that low pricing and the dynamic pricing, I don't know what the end game is going to be, because there are any number of outcomes. It could be that some consumer advocacy groups come in and regulate and kind of force the government to regulate against it. It could be that manufacturers decide to take control of their destiny. It could be that retailers start selling kind of space in their store to manufacturers to say, we're getting out of this pricing game because this just isn't worth it to us. It could be that mid-tier manufacturers are the ones that I mean, they're the ones that are really kind of the threat here, because you don't see it at the low end, because at the low end it's private label. At the high end, luxury is never going to really fluctuate in price, or it's not going to be luxury for very long if it does. And then kind of the mid-tier is where, and those are the knockoff, those are the brands that are most susceptible. They're commodities. And I think it's Sam Taylor from Oriental Trading Company. It's like if you're a commoditized retailer, you're going to die. I mean, if you're selling commodities that other people sell, you will die. So
unless you verticalized your entire business and
exactly, or at least a significant portion.
Right.
Yeah, it's like vertical integration. Absolutely.
Okay, well, Susharita, thank you so much for your time. We have time for a few questions, but thank you again. Really appreciate your comments today. It's been very helpful.